Yesterday we covered various strands of Vaishnavism, mostly regional strands and even some of the doctrinal strands of Vaishnavism, and then Vaishnavism in literature. Then the last session was Vaishnavism in various arts, visual arts, performing arts, including dance and music. Today the sessions are going to be Vaishnavism, Yoga and Rituals is going to be the first session, and the next big session is going to be on Vaishnavism in modern period. We are so fortunate that we are able to cover all these very important areas. When we prepared the concept note and mentioned yoga as part of the themes, we were not sure whether we would get really abstracts for that theme or not. And I was waiting for Krishnamacharya's institute for somebody to come, and I was not sure, because actually what happened with Krishnamacharya's tradition is many of the teachers, instructors, researchers inside the institute, they themselves are not into Vaishnavism. But fortunately, we could get Nrithya Jagannathan ji. She sent the abstract. We were very happy, very excited that somebody from the Krishnamacharya's institute, all of you probably know, if you are not aware, the two big legendaries of the spread of yoga in the world today, the modern yoga, both of them are Sri Vaishnavites. Krishnamacharya and Iyengar. We have the two names, Iyengar Yoga, Krishnamacharya Yoga. Both are Sri Vaishnavites. Is it not interesting that why should it happen only from them? We should, at least a theoretical question, a logical question, why should it happen only from them? And in my childhood, I grew up in a Madhva neighborhood, though I myself am a Smartha. And in the stories that I used to hear in the Madhva neighborhood, people used to tell me that yoga is such an important part of Madhva tradition that Madhvacharya, when he was a child, when he fell down from the lap of his mother, the stone broke because of his previous birth's yoga. His bodily strength, his physical strength was so big. And all these stories about Sri Vaishnavism also, that why yoga is so important, why they perform yoga. Later from Jayarananji, from the same Krishnamacharya Institute, I heard Krishnamacharya's interpretation of Yogasūtras, how he does that, and Īśvarapraidhānāt Eva is the sutra, and she made it Īśvarapraidhānāt Eva, and she converted that, not Va. So, it is very interesting. Īśvarapraidhānāt Eva, Sri T. Krishnamacharya's unique perspective on Yogasūtra, a very exciting paper. Madam, please come.
வணக்கம். இந்த அழகான காலை பொழுதில் உங்கள் அனைவருக்கும் நமஸ்காரங்கள். கோவில் என்றாலே வைஷ்ணவர்களுக்கு ஸ்ரீரங்கம் தான். அரங்கத்தம்மான் பள்ளி கொண்டு அருள் பாலிக்கும் இத்திருத்தலத்தில் எமக்கு இந்த வாய்ப்பை நல்கிய இண்டிகாவிற்கு மனமார்ந்த நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். லக்ஷ்மீநாத சமாரம்பாம் நாதயாமுன மத்யமாம் அஸ்மதாச்சார்ய பர்யந்தாம் வந்தே குரு பரம்பராம். குருभ्यस्तद्गुरुभ्यश्च நமோ வாகமதீமஹி वृणीमहे च तत्राद्यौ दम्पती जगतां पति. श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः. Dr. Nagaraj Paturi has already given an introduction to the Krishnamacharya tradition. Krishnamacharya is revered across the world, as possibly the father of modern yoga, and all the main streams of yoga, including Iyengar yoga, trace back to Sri Krishnamacharya. I'll just take a minute to introduce this Acharya, who lived from 1888 to 1989, acclaimed as a yogi. He was born in Muchakundapuram near Mysore, with his family tracing their ancestry to Sri Nathamuni. He studied Shastras, Purva Mimamsa at the Maharaja's Sanskrit College in Mysore, where he acquired the Vidwan title. Also studied Brahmasutra under Sri Ranganatha Brahmatantra Parakalaswami. Later went to Manasarovar. He trekked to Manasarovar, stayed there for 7 years in Tibet, studying yoga under a yogi there called Ramamohana Brahmachari. Subsequently, upon his return, his guru asked him to spread the message of yoga. This was the instruction given to him. He returned to Mysore, declined to take up the position of Pithadipati of the Parakala Math. He was offered this position thrice. He declined because his guru had instructed him to be a Yogacharya. Subsequently was appointed as the head of the Mysore Yogashala. He was appointed by Krishnaraja Odiyar IV and served under him until independence, after which the Shala had to close down for various reasons and Sri Krishnamacharya moved to Chennai, which is where he lived the rest of his life. He studied for several years in Varanasi, acquiring titles in all the 6 darshanas. He was acclaimed as a Vidwan, scholar, yogi, bhakta and bhagavata of his times. Now coming to the Yogasūtra itself, for those, I understand that this is a very diverse audience who may or may not have a background in yoga. Nevertheless, the Yogasūtra is you could say, the earliest extant complete work on yoga, attributed, coming from the Yoga Darshana system, believed to be between 200 BC and 200 CE, with multiple commentaries. Vyasa's commentary is the first, considered closest to the period of the Yogasūtra. 4 sub-commentaries exist to Vyasa's commentary. You have Tattva Vaisharadi of Vachaspati Vishra, Vivarana of Shankara, Vartika of Vijnana Bhikshu and the Bhaswati of Swami Hariharananda Aranya. These are major sub-commentaries to Vyasa's commentary, apart from a number of other independent commentaries. Now, in the background of this is where Krishnamacharya's commentary is placed. Yogavalli. This is a commentary on the Yogasūtra of Patanjali, authored by Sri Krishnamacharya, published by the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram in 1988. The Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram was set up in 1976 by Sri T.K.V. Desikacha, son and student of Sri Krishnamacharya. And the manuscript exists for all the 4 padas of the Yogasūtra, but what has been published is the first chapter with a Tamil translation by Dr. Varadachari, who was then with the French Institute of Pondicherry. Now, in the Yogavalli, Sri Krishnamacharya makes a number of references to Yoga Rahasya of Sri Nathamuni, a text believed to be lost. There is a lot of dispute because he says in his biography that he underwent a trance-like meditative experience when he visited Alvar Tirunagari, where he had a vision of Nammalvar and Nathamuni and received the teachings of the Yoga Rahasya. Nevertheless, there does exist a lot of dispute about whether this Yoga Rahasya is what was originally authored by Nathamuni, now believed to be lost. However, it is evident that across the Yoga Valli, Sri Krishnamacharya makes number of references to works of Nathamuni, specifically the Yoga Rahasya, and he also refers to the Yoga Vallari, a work believed to have been written by Ranganatha, born to Nathamuni's daughter's son, from a different gotra, obviously. And so he states that in the Yoga Valli, he has condensed the Yoga Vallari. And it is very clear that Acharya Krishnamacharya owes much to Nathamuni's Yoga Rahasya, which is the basis for his commentary on the Yogasūtra as well. Here, specifically, what I am quoting is from the introduction by Dr. Varadachari, and he says the word Va in the Yogasūtra, specifically from Krishnamacharya's perspective, does not indicate an alternative way, but the only way, or the most important, and this forms the core of my presentation today. Why this paper? The works of Krishnamacharya are known within the community of Krishnamacharya students worldwide, but the the way he has developed his commentary on the Yogasūtra is fairly less known. The reason being that it hasn't been translated into English. We have a Tamil translation, and unfortunately many of us have studied the text with our acharyas, but the text has not yet been translated into English. And therefore I felt that this was an appropriate forum to present the teachings of this Mahatma and his vision from a purely Vishishtadvaitic standpoint of how he interprets the Yoga Darshana, which is a very significant milestone, because we see that as far as Yogasūtra commentary goes, there is a paucity of literature. From a Vaishnava perspective, there are commentaries from other lenses, but commentaries from a Vishishtadvaita lens are lacking. And to the extent of my knowledge, I believe, from what I have studied of the commentaries, that this interpretation specifically of Īśvarapraidhānāt Eva is found in no other commentary, and therefore the reason for this paper. Here, it is Krishnamacharya's scholarship and his unswerving devotion to his deity, Lakshmi Hayagriva, his tutelary deity, his position, his unflinching position as a bhakta of Narayana. It is this that I wish to present, because this is pertinent in the backdrop of Vishishtadvaita Vedanta. When you take up a text like the Yatindramata Deepika, which is a summary of the core teachings of Sri Ramanuja, very clearly says that the teachings of yoga are refuted because Ishvara is presented only as a nimitta and not as the upadana karana. And here you see in the Yoga Valli, Krishnamacharya very convincingly reconciling this argument, bringing Yoga Darshana and Vishishadvaita together. Now here there are a number of commentaries that I have seen, apart from which references have been made to the Narayana Suktam, the Vedartha Sangraha, Yatindramata Deepika, as also other works of Krishnamacharya. What are the core aspects from Vishishtadvaita philosophy that you see present in Krishnamacharya's interpretation of this particular sutra? The concept of Shuddha Sattva, the nature of the Jivatma, of Bhagavan being Shuddha Sattva, the Dharma Bhuta Jnana of the Jivatma, its journey in seeking realization, specifically his commentary on how you should meditate. Aham Graha Upasana is a very beautiful commentary on Sutra 1.20. He clearly presents Narayana as the Parabrahman, as also the Antaryami, and Pranidhana equated to Prapatti. And he is very clear that this is the path of total, absolute, unconditional surrender. Also adding that Ishvara Anugraha Bala, Ishvara Prasada is essential for attainment of Kaivalya. Here specifically the Ishvara of Yogasūtra is attributed to being Vishesha Purusha, equivalent to Purushottama or Uttama Purusha of the Bhagavad Gita. For those who may not be familiar, the text flows in this manner. Yoga is defined to begin with as Chitta Vritti Nirodha, the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. Yoga Palam and the absence of Yoga Palam, Tada Drashtuhu Swarupe Avasthanam Vritti Sarupyam Itaratra. The outcome of following Yoga Sadhana and not are indicated. Then the text goes into a detail of the 5 Chitta Vrittis, the Nirodha Upayam, Abhyasa and Vairagya being presented, followed by how this will culminate in Samprajñata and Asamprajñata Samadhi. Then you have Bhava Pratyaya, those who reach and attain the state, this higher state of emancipation, and Upaya Pratyaya, which is where Shraddha is mentioned. And you see the path of Shraddha, Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna, Purvaka Itaresham, says Patanjali. Now, in all the commentaries, you see Īśvarapraidhānāt Eva presented 1.23 or Īśvarapraidhāna, usually interpreted as an option to Shraddha. Krishnamacharya's commentary is emphatic. He says there is no question of making this an option. It is the only way. Who this Ishvara is his other significant point. The suitable path for those in Yoga Marga in Kali Yuga. He says, now in this present times, we do not have the capacity to follow the extensive rigor of Yoga Sadhana as outlined by Patanjali, and therefore, Īśvarapraidhāna or absolute Prapatti is the only way. Who is this Ishvara? It is Lakshmi Sameta Narayana. Sriman Narayana Eva Upayam is the only goal. And therefore you see that this is possibly, to the extent of my understanding, the only commentary that presents Īśvara in this manner. The objections naturally that I will encounter here are that there is no other commentary that presents the text from this perspective, and here I humbly submit to Krishnamacharya's scholarship and the reasons that he gives for his interpretations, which I will share with you. We must see that his scholarship, his vidvatvam, are seen to preempt any possible objections that there may be. I am just touching on salient points that Krishnamacharya makes in the commentary before coming to 1.23. It's a very elaborate commentary. I'm touching on the major points. He says yoga is dhyanam. Yoga is equal to dhyanam. Dhyanam is Parama Purusha Sarveshwara Vishayakam. There is only one dhyayam. There is only one object. And that object is this Parama Purusha Sarveshwara. And he says, this mind, I'm not reading the Sanskrit commentary, I have deliberately removed it, I'm giving you the translation. The mind that has been cleansed of Rajas and Tamas, filled with Shuddha Sattva when using the Dharma Bhuta Jnanam of the Jivatma, by the practice of Pranayama, this is something he repeatedly emphasizes, continuously thinking of the Antaryaman, experiences Pratyaya Ekatanata, this is the state of Dhyanam indicated by the masters of yoga. For those learning yoga, this is Dhyanam. The method for this meditation on the Antaryamin, he directs us to the Narayana Suktam, where he speaks of the Adhomukha Kamalam, the Pundarika that is facing downwards, very clearly referencing the Narayana Suktam from the Taittiriya Samhita. Also, he indicates the lineage of yoga, tracing the origin to Sriman Narayana, who passes this teaching on to the Nityasuris, who are eternally in meditation on the divine. The Nityasuris pass on this teaching to Brahma, to Vashishta, Shakti, Parashara, then to Maitreya and Vyasa and Shuka. And therefore, this is how Krishnamacharya, he correlates to the lineage as indicated in the Vishnu Purana. 1.20 on Shraddha, he says, when this Jivatma, with the Dharma Bhuta Jnanam that is innate in that Jivatma, endowed with a mind that has been cleansed of Rajas and Tamas, when it transforms itself into its object of Dhyanam, it experiences that object. The Dhyaya, Akara, Avesha, he calls it. There is an Avesha literally of that object that is the focus. That state is Samadhi. It can be attained by the practice of Aham Graha Upasana. How do you do this? You have to meditate on the divine that is enshrined in the lotus of the heart. He directs us to the Pratardhana Vidya and also calling attention to the Mahanarayana Upanishad as well. He says, how long the Samadhi lasts depends on the Prarthana of the practitioner, the intensity of that Sankalpa and the Prarthana. And by the state of the Samadhi, the Almighty Mahavishnu is pleased, and so with that delight appears in the form that can be meditated on. The Saguna form appears before the eyes of the meditator, conferring upon the meditator everything that he seeks. His argument here for Īśvarapraidhānāt as the only path, this is an argument that Krishnamacharya builds up across multiple sutra commentaries. He says there are 4 causes attributed to success in yoga: Abhyasa, Vairagya, Shraddha and Īśvarapraidhānāt. He presents this as a ladder. And he says that these are the paths towards Samadhi. That these are optional is indicated by the use of Va. It is true that the Va indicates the sense optional, but Amarasimha in the Avyaya Varga of Namalinga Anushasanam says, Evam, Tu, Vai, Va are all words indicative of Avadharana, which is affirmation. And therefore, he says, using the strength of these statements, Īśvarapraidhānāt is the primary cause for Samadhi. Going to the point where in the Yogavalli, Krishnamacharya's commentary actually splits the Yogavalli into 2. There is a Purva Bhaga, which is still Īśvarapraidhānāt, and there is an Uttara Bhaga, where he says, it is impossible, the paths that mentioned in the Purva Bhaga, Abhyasa, Vairagya and Shraddha, he says, in this Kali Yuga, Atyantika Vairagya Sahita Prakriti Purusha Viveka Khyati is possible for those of the Krita Yuga, not now. And therefore here, The path is Īśvarapraidhānāt. The path is absolute surrender. And it is by the grace of that Paramapurusha Narayana that we attain our goal. Coming to Īśvarapraidhāna itself, he says, who is this Īśvara? Īśvarapraidhānam iti atra Īśvarapadam Īśvarīn cha abhidatte. He says this term Īśvara is inclusive of Īśvari as Mahalakshmi. She is a part of this creation of the universe and they manifest as the Divya Dampati. How do you do this pranidhana? This is essentially prapatti. Anukulyasya sankalpam pratikulyasya varjanam rakshishyati iti vishwasaha goptripta varanam tata atma nikshepa karpanyam shadangani. So this is this idea that he says, I am overwhelmed by the three tapas. I have no way to withstand this suffering. There is none other than you. You are my sole refuge. I possess nothing. I am devoid of strength. And I do not want to do what is inappropriate. And so you are the one with boundless compassion. With this certitude, I surrender everything to you. Guide me on my path. This is the bhavana behind Īśvarapraidhāna as presented by Sri Krishnamacharya. He says Īśvara is that pure Īśvara which is not limited by anything. And that one who is with Vasudeva, who is Vasudeva with Lakshmi, is the one represented by Pranava. Tad japaha, tad artha bhavanam, he says. And he gives us many references. Paripashyanti dhira, he says, he refers to Sri Suktam, where Shri is invoked as the Supreme. And he says that this pranidhana is the highest form of bhakti. Lakshmi Sameta Narayana are pleased and they will bestow the freedom, the liberation from the Tapatraya. The term Purusha Vishesha is here Purushottama, also referred to as Uttama Purusha. Here he quotes the Mahabharata. And he says that Ayamartaha Uttamaha Purushastvanyaha Paramatma iti etat udahritaha yo lokatrayam avishya bibhartya avyaya Īśvara. Just 2 minutes. I'm almost done. And so he says those who practice this Īśvarapraidhāna with bhakti, taking up the sadhana of the Ashtanga from Yama Niyama, culminating in Samadhi, for them the benefits of yoga are visible in their hands, like the Amalaka flute attained in the hand. Now, just as a summary, this thread of thought, you see, it is in alignment with prior teachings. You have in the Shri Stuti very clearly Vedanta Desika Swami indicating that, oh Mahalakshmi, you are inseparable from this Narayana and we are invoking both of you. You see again in verse 5, verse 6, verse 9 of the Shri Stuti, Vedanta Desika very clearly indicating the sovereignty of Mahalakshmi as a part of Īśvara, Īśvari, Bhavam. Also referred to in the Yatindra Matadipika, Avatara 7.24 to 5. The idea of Dhyanam, you see, Jnana Yoga is a kind of meditation on the real nature of oneself as separate from Prakriti. And it exists for the purpose of Īśvara. Īśvara is presented as the Bhokta. And uninterrupted flow like the oil that is Bhakti Yoga. That kind of a Dhyanam where there is unwavering attention on the Paramatma who resides within as Antaryami. And Dhyana denoting Bhakti is very clearly presented in the Yatindra Matadipika, Sadhana Bhakti and Phala Bhakti, where Sadhana Bhakti is the path of Ashtanga Yoga. Also you find this idea that since Narayana is the supreme and various sources are quoted, that supreme Narayana alone is the source of object of meditation. So Krishnamacharya's work is in alignment with prior works. It also seems to be in alignment with the Bhagavad Dhyana Sopana of Swami Desika. This thought continues in Krishnamacharya's other works, not just the Yogasūtra commentary. He says, Nrityati yogi hridaye dhritva sundara vapusham lakshmi kantam jagad adharam paramatmanam nandatyeva. So this is a composition of Krishnamacharya. Later he says, Ma kuru rinam api alpam heyam ma vasa ripu parivare satatam ma kshipa roga jvalani gatram ma vismara ma ramanam hridaye. And so this is a repeating refrain in all of Krishnamacharya's works, specifically in the Yoga Rahasya that he attributes to Nathamuni, we'll leave the disputes aside. He says, Shriman Narayano Devaha Sarvesham Hridi Bhasate Upadanam Nimittam Cha Jagatas Sarjane Swarat. He mentions Narayana as Upadana Nimitta and he says, Sanga Yoga Samabhyase Samsmari Satatam Harim. This Hari has to be remembered. This is the point where Vishishtadvaita and Yoga Darshana converge without any problem because he is reconciling all of this. Vacham Yami Swashramoktan Dharman Kurvan Jitendriya. Now here just one more point before I close. This is again a very unique contribution of Sri Krishnamacharya to the delineation of the term yoga. And he says yogam is formed by the 4 bijas yam, and gam. And he has taught us this through a particular verse written by him. I'm giving you just the first line. Marut Hari Rama Tarkshyam Bijam Sankalanat Yogam. Where Marut represents Marut Tattva, wind, air. Hari is represented as Rama represented as Divya Dampati, Tarkshya is Garuda, representing the Guru Tattva. And he says when these converge, in that convergence is yoga. And this was Krishnamacharya's very clear pathway that the goal to be attained is Lakshmi Narayana. For that there has to be an Anushasanam. It has to be a Gurumukha Anushasanam received by the teacher through the guidance of the teacher. The key to unlock this is prana as the Marut Tattva, and therefore the goal of yoga is attained. And so with this humbly I submit my conclusion that the Yoga Valli in the context of Vaishnava literature should occupy a place of some significance because this is a unique perspective on yoga sadhana, reconciling Vedanta with Yoga Darshana and presenting Sriman Narayana as the Dheya, as the only suitable Dheya Vastu. And Krishnamacharya says the path of Yoga Ashtanga prepares a bhakta for the highest level of prapatti, which will lead everyone. And he says this is possible for everyone, provided there is a little effort, a little bit of inclination to go on this path. And so this commentary is a significant one in interpreting Yoga Darshana through this Vaishnava lens. Thank you. Namaskar.
Questions? Abhinav Kadambi, who is now bringing his question, is going to present his paper as the 4th one after the next 2 papers. He is going to talk on Yoga Shri Prashna Samhita, a brief overview. Please.
Okay.
No, let him finish. Yeah.
So, in fact, part of my presentation is already over here. So, it's like giving you sanction for sleeping during my presentation partially. But anyway, I wouldn't say that. Okay. I shouldn't say that when I'm presenting. So my question is something very much intriguing when you start doing sadhana, when you start studying the different upasana margas. So, in the Vedanta tradition, there is this specific method known as the Ahangraha Upasana. So, the Ahangraha Upasana is common to almost all Vedantis. While the Advaitins interpret the Ahangraha Upasana differently, the Vishishtadvaitis interpret it very differently. So, is there any extra information that you found regarding it?
She covered it during.
Yes, sir. But she said what Krishnamacharya ji said, but I would like to know if there's any more detail in the commentary itself regarding Ahangraha Upasana in other traditions, which he has mentioned.
He has come to only the
Okay.
tradition is very clear. It is Antaryami and you visualize Srimad Narayana in the Dharana.
Okay, thank you. If you had said yes, then I would have asked more, but yeah. But I would like to ask Nagaraj ji to elaborate if he knows anything regarding this in the Advaita tradition. Ahangraha Upasana.
Yeah, there is actually, I'll share with you a video talk that we organized. Ganesh Īśvarapraidhānāt from Sringeri Mutt he gave a talk on Upasana. And as part of Upasana, he covered Ahangraha Upasana. For the 50% of his talk, he covered only Ahangraha Upasana. And he covered the Advaitic interpretation of Ahangraha Upasana. I'll share the video.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
I'll do that. I'll do that. Yes. Yeah. Actually, I get tempted, so I'll not take much time. The whole problem that was chosen during that discussion was there is usually a misapprehension that Advaita as a Vedanta should not support Upasanas at all. No Upasana has to be there. So Ganesh Īśvarapraidhānāt chose this as his problem and was giving all the logical arguments of how Upasana is looked at from the Advaita Vedanta point of view. And as part of that, he brought up the Ahangraha Upasana as a category and dealt with it from Shankara's point of view. So,
it's not a question. First, I must congratulate you for your paper, excellent paper. Supplementing what you have been telling, I find that this particular sutra, Videha Pratyayanam Prakridilayaha, who are those Videha Pratyayas? No proper explanation is given in any of the commentaries. My conception is that it may perhaps relate to the Nityasuri concept. Only then it has yes. Yes, yes. Okay, fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I was mentioning Jayaramanji as the person who was covering this, but my mistake. Now I remember that it was Raghu Ananta Narayananji, the Ritambara senior scholar, a very senior student of Krishnamacharya ji. It was he who covered this Īśvarapraidhānāt Eva, one of the presentations. Now sure. So that was very interesting, and the last part was so interesting that in the Madhva tradition also, the famous Vayu Jivottama Hari Sarvottama maxim, when you look at the Vayu Jivottama, the Vayu part there is actually Mukhya Prana. I don't know how many people know the word Madhva is actually a Rigvedic word. And there in Rigveda it means Mukhya Prana only. And that is from where you get Hanuman, Bhima and Madhva as the lineage. And that is from where you get this Mukhya Prana point of view. And you have a special commentary, a special version of Patanjali Yogasūtras. Somebody sent that manuscript to me and said that it was actually a different Yogasūtra. But when I saw all the sutras are pranayama oriented sutras only, so probably the Mukhya Prana Upasana has become so prominent throughout India, and I am happy to see that Krishnamacharya has given that O is actually Dampati, is a very interesting interpretation. In the Pranava, the vowel part is Dampati, is really very important. And the name Yoga being made into Bijaksharas is really amazing. Thank you very much for that.